What's up, guys, and welcome back to the channel. And as you guys should know, UFC 327 is right around the corner, and this numbered event is going to be absolutely stacked. UFC 327 is going to be taking place in Miami, Florida, in the Acacia Center. I believe that's how you pronounce it. But like I said, UFC 327, there's two title fights headlining the card. You have the fight for the light heavyweight title, the vacant light heavyweight title between Yuri Procházka versus Carlos Ulberg. Then you have Joshua Van defending his flyweight title against Tatsuro Taira, which is going to be a banger fight as well. But overall, this card is probably like one of the best cards of the year. I think it's definitely top 3 on paper. There's a lot of good names on this card. Of course, like I just said, you have the main and co-main event, but you also have lots of contenders fighting. There's a lot of ranked fighters on this card, and overall, I think this card is going to be amazing. I'm looking forward to watching this fight live. Of course, my favorite fighter is headlining the card, Yuri Procházka. That is going to be a exciting but nerve-wracking event, because if Yuri Procházka gets knocked out, I don't know what I'm going to do. But let's get straight into this card. As usual, I'm going to be providing you guys with my predictions for every single fight happening on this card. So without further ado, let's get straight into it. First fight on the card, we have Charles Radtke versus Francisco Prado. Charles Radtke was supposed to fight on the previous card the week before this against Jose Henrique. Unfortunately, that fight had to get canceled. I think Jose Henrique had to pull out due to some issues. But the UFC, they pushed Charles Radtke a week later onto UFC 327. And like I said, he's going to be fighting Francisco Prado. I'm going to pick Charles Radtke by decision. Charles Radtke, he's very underrated. Like I mentioned in my previous video, he's only lost to top tier competition in the welterweight division. All of his losses, I think, are ranked fighters. We're talking like Carlos Prates. We're talking like Mike Malott. Like Charles Radtke, he's not a scrub. He's not losing to bums in the UFC. So I'm going to pick Charles Radtke in this fight. He should control where the fight takes place. He has good pressure. He has good forward movement. And Francisco Prado is dangerous offensively. But when he's fighting off the back foot, which I think that's what he's going to be doing in this matchup, since Charles Radtke is going to be initiating that forward pressure, I think Francisco Prado is going to be forced to fight on the back foot. And when he fights on the back foot, he is not as good as when he fights on the front foot. So I think Radtke, he's going to mix the striking with the clinch work, have steady volume on the feet, and over 3 rounds, I think Charles Radtke is going to win a decision victory in this matchup. But next fight on the card, we have Chris Padilla versus MarQuel Mederos. I'm going to go with Chris Padilla by decision. Chris Padilla, he's a super underrated fighter. He's on a 4-fight win streak against decent competition in the lightweight division. He's becoming like a dark horse in this division, and I'm going to pick him in this matchup by decision. MarQuel Mederos, don't sleep on him. He's very good as well. Both of these fighters are undefeated in the UFC lightweight division, so someone's going to experience their first loss in the UFC. I just think Chris Padilla is more well-rounded. MarQuel Mederos, he's like barely scraping by with split decisions. He went to a split decision with Austin Hubbard, I believe, and I don't think he got a finish in his UFC career. While Chris Padilla, he's knocking out his opponents. He's submitting his opponents. He went to a split decision with Jai Herbert, but Jai Herbert, he's a tricky opponent. He's lanky, he's wiry and fast and tall. So that was more of a tricky stylistic matchup for Chris Padilla. That's why I think that fight was so close. But he's very well-rounded. His striking is good. His grappling is underrated. And MarQuel Mederos, he's dangerous in like certain moments. He can be explosive. He does have like bursts of speed that he can use. But I just think that Chris Padilla, the way that he mixes in the grappling into his MMA game is going to be the thing that changes how this fight works. So I'm going to go with Chris Padilla by decision. next fight on the card, we have Tatiana Suarez versus Luque Godinez. This fight was really tough for me to pick, but I'm gonna go with the Mexican Lupita Godinez in this matchup. I think Lupita Godinez is gonna win by a decision because Tatiana Suarez, she's good. Her grappling and her wrestling is what pushes her to that elite level in the strawweight division, but she does not offer any striking or any damage on the feet. That's why I think Lupita Godinez is going to win this matchup. Lupita, she's a great boxer. She has some good defensive wrestling. However, Suarez, she could definitely control her for most of the fight. That's what I'm worried about. And that's what made this fight so hard to pick, because we're picking the control and wrestling of Tatiana Suarez versus the boxing and damage of Lupita Godinez. But I think Lupita is going to do the right amount of damage to secure rounds. Tatiana Suarez, her striking is not that good. Her striking is subpar for the strawweight division. We saw it when she faced Weili Zhang. She just got pieced up on the feet. She had nothing to offer on the feet. That's why I think Lupita is going to take over this fight. Lupita Godinez has good cardio. She can keep the fight in striking range, and I think her volume is going to be a major factor in her winning this fight. And I'm going to go with that Mexican boxing in this matchup. We saw what Alexa Grasso just accomplished in her fight. I think Lupita Godinez, her boxing is going to be very good. She's going to land the better shots in this fight. I can see Tatiana Suarez taking a lot of damage, and her wrestling is just going to degrade like we saw when she fought Weili Zhang. Weili Zhang, her boxing and her striking was just able to piece up Tatiana Suarez. So by the end of the fourth and the fifth round, Tatiana Suarez, her wrestling game couldn't get going because she took so much damage on the feet, and it kind of just messed with her head, because anytime she would try to close the distance, she would get hit with a solid combination by Weili Zhang. That's why I think Tatiana Suarez, her wrestling couldn't get going. She can't compete in the striking. I think Lupita Godinez, like I said, she has the edge in the striking. Tatiana Suarez has the edge in the grappling. I'm going to pick the damage of Lupita Godinez over the control of Tatiana Suarez. But next fight on the card, we have Kelvin Gastelum versus Vicente Luque. I'm going to go with Kelvin Gastelum by decision. This is a fight between two veterans of the UFC. I think Kelvin Gastelum was recently inducted into the UFC Hall of Fame because of his performance in his fight against Israel Adesanya. That fight was absolutely legendary, and he definitely deserved to be in the Hall of Fame because of that. And Vicente Luque, I just think he's washed, and Kelvin Gastelum, he's not washed. He's definitely a more jaded version of his prime self. But Kelvin Gastelum, he still is a very solid fighter. He has some good boxing. He showed it when he fought Dustin Stoltzfus. Kelvin Gastelum, his hands are still fast. He can find the right shots. And the only thing that we have to worry about is if Kelvin Gastelum is going to make weight. That's my only concern. And on the other hand, Vicente Luque is almost completely washed, and he's only 34 years old. I think Vicente Luque has been through way too many wars in his career. He took too much damage, and ever since his fight against Joaquin Buckley, where he completely wilted and broke, he's never looked the same. He did get a solid win against Themba Gorimbo, but Themba Gorimbo, he isn't even that good to begin with. Don't get me wrong, Vicente Luque, he's an elite welterweight. He's a decent fighter, but against UFC competition, I think he's going to wilt again against Kelvin Gastelum. I'm going to pick Kelvin Gastelum by decision, but I would not be surprised if Kelvin Gastelum gets the TKO, because Vicente Luque tends to absorb unnecessary damage in the striking exchanges, and Gastelum's footwork and his hand speed and his boxing, I think he's going to touch up Vicente Luque, and I could see a solid 30-27 decision for Kelvin Gastelum. Like I said, I would not be surprised if Kelvin Gastelum gets a TKO victory as well. But next fight on the card, we have a really good matchup between Mateusz Gamrot versus Esteban Ribovics. I'm gonna pick Esteban Ribovics by decision. I just think Ribovic's sharp striking and his boxing and his takedown defense is gonna give him a real good chance to beat Mateusz Gamrot. Gamrot, his wrestling is his bread and butter. He's probably one of the best pure wrestlers in the lightweight division. Of course, you have Arman Tsarukyan and people like that, but Islam Makhachev, he's at welterweight. So there's not really too much competition when it comes to the best wrestler in the lightweight division. So I think Mateusz Gamrot, he's probably easily top 3 best wrestlers in the lightweight division. But Esteban Ribovics, he brings the takedown defense with the damage on the feet. That's why I'm leaning towards Esteban Ribovics in this matchup. Is not as bad as Tatiana Suarez versus Lupita Godinez, because Mateusz Gamrot, he does offer some striking on the feet. It's not a complete wash in the boxing, in the kickboxing, but the way Esteban Ribovics mixes in the kicking game, I think that is going to be a big factor. I can definitely see him kicking to the body, sapping that gas tank of Mateusz Gamrot. His kicking game is really elite for the lightweight division. We saw what he did to Terrence McKinney, and I think Ribovics, he's going to have the speed advantage on the feet as well. And he's defensively sound. His guard is always up. He's always ready to absorb damage. And I think Mateusz Gamrot, he's going to get outclassed on the feet, and he's going to go to the wrestling out of necessity. He's going to go to the grappling because he's going to be desperate. And the desperate takedowns, I think Esteban Ribovics is going to stuff easily. However, I'm not going to underestimate Gamrot. Gamrot, when he fought Ludovic Klein, he had a great performance. So I'm not going to underestimate Mateusz Gamrot. He very well can use his grappling and win this fight. He's coming off of a loss against Charles Oliveira, but we just saw Charles Oliveira. He evolved his game, and he's a completely different elite fighter in his wrestling game. So I'm not going to sleep on Mateusz Gamrot. He's ranked in the lightweight division for a reason. Like I said, he's top 3 best wrestlers in the lightweight division. But I think Esteban Ribovics, his kicking game, his boxing, his speed advantage, and his takedown defense is going to make a difference in this fight. That's why I'm picking him to win by a decision. But next fight on the card, we have a fight that should have been in Bellator between Patricio Pitbull versus Aaron Pico. I'm going to go with Aaron Pico. I feel like a lot of people are going to go with Patricio Pitbull, but I think Aaron Pico, he's the more dangerous fighter, and he's the more explosive fighter as well. He's going to have the speed advantage. Patricio Pitbull, he's kind of on the twilight of his career. He's 38 years old. He's going to be definitely slowing down. And Aaron Pico, he's technically not even in his MMA prime. He's 29 years old. He probably has a good 3 years before we see him in his prime form. He did lose badly against Lerone Murphy, but Lerone Murphy, he's a top contender in the featherweight division. The only thing that I'm worried about is Aaron Pico's chin. He's very chinny, but I think his pressure, his power, his explosiveness is going to make a difference. Patricio Pitbull, he's definitely going to have to look for a counter shot in the fire, which he definitely could find. He dropped Dan Ige, which is a very tough fighter to drop, even though he got finished in his last fight. Dan Ige, that was his first time being finished. And Patricio Pitbull, he dropped him, and that was a very solid moment. He definitely has the power to knock out Aaron Pico. That's why I think this prediction is pretty close. I feel like a lot of people are going to be picking Patricio Pitbull because of that, but I think the speed and that relentless pressure of Aaron Pico is going to win him a decision victory, or even a TKO. I'm going to pick Aaron Pico by knockout, actually. But next fight in the welterweight division, we have a matchup between Kevin Holland versus Randy Brown. I'm going to pick Kevin Holland by TKO. This is a very hard fight to predict because Kevin Holland is so inconsistent. He's probably one of the most inconsistent fighters in the UFC. One moment, he's sending Joaquin Buckley flying with a piston of a right hand, and the next moment, he's fighting D-Rod to a war decision with Gumby arms and almost no power in his shots. So this is a very hard fight to predict because Randy Brown, on paper, he's the better striker. He has the fundamentals, his striking is sharp, but I think Randy Brown, he's notorious for being kind of a glass cannon. He's very powerful. He face planted Nicholas Dalby. That was one of the best knockouts of 2025. But like I said, he's kind of a glass cannon. The reason why I'm picking Kevin Holland is because of the durability difference. Kevin Holland has a really good chin, and in those exchanges, when the fight gets like scrappy, I'm gonna pick Kevin Holland to be able to take a shot, while Randy Brown, I don't think he can take the shots of Kevin Holland if they land clean. So I'm gonna pick Kevin Holland by TKO. This is going to be a very close fight, though. I would not be surprised if Randy Brown wins this fight. I can even see a Randy Brown knockout as well, because Randy Brown, he has a lot of power in his hands. However, his chin isn't that good. That's why I'm picking Kevin Holland. If Kevin Holland can land any clean shots on Randy Brown's chin, I think the fight is going to be over. So I'm picking Kevin Holland by knockout. And on top of that, Kevin Holland, he does have the grappling advantage. His grappling is kind of underrated a little bit. Against middleweights, he just gets completely out-grappled and smushed. But against welterweights, Kevin Holland's grappling is kind of a tool in his arsenal that he can use at any moment of the fight. But I'm going to go with Kevin Holland by knockout. Next fight on the card, we have Cub Swanson versus Nate Landwehr. This is going to be a fight between two veterans in the featherweight division, and I'm going to go with Cub Swanson by decision. I think Cub Swanson, he's going to use his crafty striking, and he's going to use that movement as well. Cub Swanson, he's older. He's like 42, pushing 43, but he still has the speed to him, and I think that speed is going to be a big difference maker in this matchup. Landwehr, he's going to be very chaotic. You never know what's going to happen in a Nate Landwehr fight. But I think Cub Swanson, he's going to find the right shots. He's going to use his speed. He's going to blitz forward. And he's going to land that right hand right on Nate Landwehr's chin. And I think Cub Swanson is going to use that crafty striking to find the right shot. And I can see him putting away Nate Landwehr by knockout in the second round. I can even see a decision victory. I'm going to go with the knockout. I think if Cub Swanson retires on a knockout like this, that would be a great ending to his career. But that's going to be it for the prelims. Now, let's move on to the main card. First fight on the main card, we have Azamat Murzakanov versus Paulo Costa. I'm a big fan of Azamat Murzakanov, and I'm going to pick him by knockout in this fight. I think Paulo Costa, he really has no business being at 205. I think the move to 205 is kind of unnecessary, especially since he's coming off of that win against Roman Kopylov. So I think he can definitely make something shake at middleweight. But light heavyweight, I think Azamat Murzakanov, he's going to have the power advantage. And interestingly enough, I think Azamat is going to have the speed advantage as well, which is weird because Paulo Costa is the one moving up a division, so you expect the lighter fighter to be the faster fighter. But the thing about Azamat Murzakanov, he is small for the light heavyweight division. He's extremely dense, and since he's smaller, he has the speed advantage. His hands are lightning fast. His boxing and his striking is extremely technical. He can definitely find a shot on Paulo Costa's chin and knock him out. I think Paulo Costa, he only has one loss by knockout against Israel Adesanya. But Azamat Murzakanov, I think he's definitely packing more power than Israel Adesanya. And he should definitely find the chin of Paulo Costa. But Azamat Murzakanov, I don't really know why he took this fight. I think he was in a position to get a really good opponent to get him to the title picture. He's coming off of that win against Alexander Rakic, which was a spectacular first round finish. And I think he should be fighting someone like a Khalil Roundtree or a Magomed Ankalaev, someone coming off of a loss in the top 5. I think that will be a perfect fight for Azamat Murzakanov. He can definitely fight someone like that after he wins this matchup, but I just think Paulo Costa is kind of a risky opponent when you could be making your way to the title picture. But who am I to question his career? Azamat Murzakanov, he likes to stay active, so I definitely see why he's probably just taking this fight as like a tune-up to get him ready for the top of the division. But yeah, I think Azamat Murzakanov, he's going to win by a knockout in the second round. But next fight on the card, we have a really good matchup between Dominick Reyes versus Johnny Walker. And this fight is kind of difficult to predict because both of these fighters don't really have a chin. Their chins are some of the worst in the UFC. But my logic when predicting this fight is that Dominick Reyes, he's way more technical. Johnny Walker, he's a wild striker, and he's going to give opportunities for Dominick Reyes to knock him out. So I think Dominick Reyes is going to win this fight by a knockout, probably in the first or second round. Dominick Reyes, if you look at the fighters that knock out Dominick Reyes, it's more of a technical way that they knock him out. He gets knocked out like in a exchange, like a precise counter shot, like with Carlos Ulberg, or just a heavy shot that would knock out anyone, like Yuri Procházka's spinning elbow, or that massive overhand by Ryan Spann. But Johnny Walker, on the other hand, he's getting chinned by Jamal Hill, who doesn't really have power, and he just taps him on the forehead, and he goes flying backwards. I think Johnny Walker, he definitely has the worst chin in this matchup. And Dominick Reyes, he has the technical enough striking to find the chin of Johnny Walker. Like I said, Johnny Walker, he's a very wild striker. He's very unorthodox. And he's the one who gives those opportunities for his opponents to knock him out. While Dominick Reyes, his opponents have to really find the knockout shot and hit him with something that I think would knock out almost anyone. All the fights that Dominick Reyes gets knocked out, I think most fighters would definitely get knocked out by some of those shots. Like, you're telling me that John Jones would tank that spinning elbow of Yuri Procházka? Like, no. Like, some of those shots that Dominick Reyes gets knocked out by, those are understandable. While on the other hand, Johnny Walker, he's getting knocked out by, like, small uppercuts in the pocket. He got knocked out bad against Volkan Ozdemir. He's getting knocked out by Magomed Ankalaev, who isn't that powerful of a striker. He's a good striker, but the way that he responds to some shots, they're very exaggerated. So I'm going to go with Dominick Reyes by knockout. And let's move on to the next fight on the card. We have the fight in the heavyweight division between Curtis Blaydes versus Josh Hawkick. I think this fight is going to be extremely one-sided. I'm going with Curtis Blaydes. He's the more proven fighter. He's the better heavyweight. Josh Hawkick, he's a wrestler. And the UFC, they're kind of giving him like a very, very big push up the rankings because he like talks a lot of mess on the mic. He's a very good fighter when it comes to self-promotion. But Curtis Blaydes, he's been at the top of the division for a long time. I would say like probably close to a decade now. And he's a very solid heavyweight. He's been at the top of the division for a long time. He's a veteran. He's been fighting top competition for basically his whole career. And Josh Hawkick, he just doesn't have the experience like Curtis Blaydes. I don't know why so many people are picking Josh Hawkick to beat Curtis Blaydes. Curtis Blaydes, he had kind of a dud performance in his last matchup, but everyone has a bad performance. He still won. And Curtis Blaydes, he has the wrestling to compete with Josh Hawkick. Josh Hawkick, he's fighting bum heavyweights like Denzel Freeman who just don't have the cardio, that don't have the experience, that will when any type of adversity happens to them. And Curtis Blaydes, he's not like that. He has the experience. He has the wrestling. Let's be honest, Curtis Blaydes is a better wrestler than Josh Hawkick. So don't tell me that Josh Hawkick is just going to all of a sudden come in here and just be a long-time proven heavyweight in the division just like that. I think he definitely needed way more time to build himself and build himself into a complete heavyweight. Josh Hawkick, he's going to be on the lighter side of the heavyweight division. Curtis Blaydes, he's a natural, huge heavyweight wrestler with very good fundamentals. He's in the full out that heavyweight frame. In his last fight, I think he weighed in close to like 260. And Josh Hockett, he's weighing in like 230. There's going to be an easy 25-pound weight advantage on the side of Curtis Blaydes. So I'm picking Curtis Blaydes to win by decision. I can see him out wrestling Josh Hockett and just making him wilt. I can even see a TKO. Actually, yeah, I'm going to go with Curtis Blaydes by decision, but I would not be surprised if Curtis Blaydes out wrestles Josh Hockett, gets to a dominant position, and gets a ground and pound TKO. But let's move on to the co-main event of the card. We have Joshua Van versus Tatsuro Taira. And I'm going to go with Tatsuro Taira by submission. This is kind of what I expected the fight between Joshua Van and Pantoja to go. That was a fluke accident that ended that fight. But like I said, when Joshua Van fought Alexander Pantoja, the grappling difference is going to be too big. Joshua Van, he has not been training MMA for that long, and it's impressive on how far he's come, but it's not going to be enough time to tighten up those little holes in his game when it comes to the grappling. I believe Joshua Van's been training for like 8 years. And Tatsuro Taira, his grappling and his submission game is completely on a different level when it comes to fighters in the flyweight division. I think Tatsuro Taira is going to take the back of Joshua Van and submit him. I think Joshua Van, his submission defense isn't that proven. Yeah, he can defend takedowns against Reyes, who isn't really a submission ace like Tatsuro Taira. His wrestling defense is good, but Tatsuro Taira, he doesn't need to get a takedown to submit his opponents. He's very good at taking the back. Like I said, I think he's going to take the back of Joshua Van. And let's be honest as well. Tatsuro Taira, his striking is completely underrated. I think people are overlooking his striking. Tatsuro Taira actually uses his frame and size very well at flyweight. He's going to have a 5-inch reach advantage. He's going to have a 2-inch height advantage. And I think his frame is going to be too much for Joshua Van. I think he can keep Joshua Van at the end of his punches. Joshua Van, he's going to be the one who has to close the distance and fire off shots in the pocket, fire off the boxing combinations in close range. And Tatsuro Taira, he's going to grab Joshua Van and he's going to take his back. I think it's going to be that simple. Every time Joshua Van tries to crash into range, Tatsuro Taira is going to be there and he's going to be open to taking his back. Of course, Joshua Van, he can rise to the occasion like he did against Brandon Royval. I've been counting Joshua Van out a lot and he's been proving me wrong, but I think Joshua Van, him having the belt, I'm not going to say it's a fluke because he did win the fight. Even though it was an accident, you can't really fault Joshua Van. I don't get people hating on Joshua Van when he was like celebrating and stuff because the win, it was legit. In the MMA rulebook, it counts as a TKO. Pantoja, he did get injured, but when it comes down to the actual like fighting and what happened, he did not beat Alexandre Pantoja. He injured himself in the first 45 seconds of the fight. So Joshua Van, he may have the belt. And he did earn the belt. He's the rightful champion of the flyweight division. But I don't think he proved his grappling defense in that fight against Pantoja. And I think Tatsuro Taira, he's a better submission artist than Alexandre Pantoja. I don't think that's a controversial statement. They both have similar styles. Alexandre Pantoja and Tatsuro Taira, their styles are really similar. I think Pantoja is a better striker and he's a better boxer. He's better at getting dirty and breaking his opponents. He definitely has better cardio. But Tatsuro Taira, I think he's better at getting those submissions. His jiu-jitsu is slightly better than Pantoja. And I think that's going to be a problem for Joshua Van. Joshua Van, he hasn't really proved his submission defense. His striking is amazing. Don't get me wrong. He's definitely the better striker. But when you're dealing with that range disadvantage, Joshua Van is going to be the one who has to close distance, and Joshua Van is going to be the one who has to enter that range where Tatsuro Taira can initiate his grappling. Like I said, he does not need a takedown to take your back and submit you. So even if Joshua Van's wrestling defense is sound enough, I think Tatsuro Taira, his grappling and his back-taking skill is going to give him an edge in this matchup. That win against Brandon Moreno, I think, is very underrated. A lot of people just chalk it up to Brandon Moreno having a bad night and stuff, but Tatsuro Taira, he knocked out Brandon Moreno. I don't think Brandon Moreno has ever been knocked out in his MMA career. Even Loner Kavanaugh wasn't able to knock out Brandon Moreno. So to do that to someone who's a legend of the flyweight division like Brandon Moreno, I think Tatsuro Taira is going to be a big problem for Joshua Van. But now let's move on to the main event of the card. Yuri Procházka, my favorite fighter, versus Carlos Ulberg for the vacant light heavyweight title. This is a tough matchup because Yuri Procházka is fighting someone with the similar style to Alex Pereira. And Alex Pereira, he just has Yuri Procházka's number. I don't think there's a world where Yuri Procházka will ever beat Alex Pereira. Of course, there's a chance, but Alex Pereira, he's too technical of a striker for someone like Yuri Procházka, and that's okay. We're not expecting someone to win all of their fights. Everyone runs into that one person who just has their number. Fortunately for Yuri Procházka, Alex Pereira, he's not in the light heavyweight division anymore. He moved up to heavyweight. So there's an open belt that Yuri Procházka could capture, and he could still cement his legacy in the light heavyweight division. The problem is Carlos Ulberg carries that similar style to Alex Pereira. So this is going to be a career-defining matchup for Yuri Procházka. I think 10 years from now, if you think about Yuri Procházka, this is going to be that career-defining moment where this is going to make the difference in his entire legacy in the sport. That's because this is going to be his opportunity to bounce back and capture the light heavyweight belt for the second time. Not a lot of people do that. A lot of fighters, when they lose the belt, it's hard for them to get past that mental block and build themselves back up and become the title holder again. So, like I said, this is going to be a pivotal moment in his career. And he's fighting someone with that similar style to Alex Pereira. So if he could win this fight, it'll kind of be a way of showing that he made the necessary improvements to fight a more technical fighter like Carlos Ulberg. Carlos Ulberg, he's not equivalent to Alex Pereira. I'm not saying anything like that. But they both have that technical striking style that can give Yuri Procházka problems. Now, when we talk about the actual matchup, Yuri Procházka, we all know him. We all love him. He's very wild. He's unorthodox. He keeps his hands low. However, after his second loss to Alex Pereira, I think he definitely tightened up his game. He's definitely more defensive. You can definitely find some more moments of him putting his hands up and stuff like that. So I think Yuri Procházka did some reflecting and he made himself a little bit more defensively sound. Even when it comes to his head movement, when he fought Jamal Hill, his head movement was on point. So he could definitely bring that to the table, and that will definitely be a problem for Carlos Ulberg. And by the way, before we even get into this matchup, this fight is going to end by a knockout. Either Yuri Procházka is going to get knocked out trying to get into range against Carlos Ulberg, or Yuri Procházka is going to knock out Carlos Ulberg after breaking him after a certain amount of rounds. That's how I think this fight is going to go. I'm leaning towards Yuri Procházka winning because Carlos Ulberg, I think he's a very good striker. But when he gets hurt, I think he doesn't have that recoverability of a Yuri Procházka. I think that's why he adapted that more passive style. When he really tried to get down dirty and really scrap in the pocket, he got knocked out against Kennedy Nzechukwu. So I think if Yuri Procházka could get to Carlos Ulberg in almost any way, the fight is going to be Yuri Procházka's to win. However, Carlos Ulberg, he perfected that passive striking style so well, it's going to be a puzzle for Yuri Procházka to close range safely without getting tapped on the chin like what happened to Dominick Reyes. So it's going to be tough. I think Yuri Procházka, he's going to have the experience. He's going to have to use all his knowledge to close that distance. Because like I said, if Yuri Procházka can just get into that range, put it on Carlos Ulberg, I think he wins the fight. Carlos Ulberg, I think he's definitely breakable. I think Yuri Procházka can break him in like the third round if he plays his cards right. However, the way that Yuri Procházka needs to win this fight is that he kind of needs to play it like he fought Alexander Rakic, just with less damage taken in that first round. Because we all know the strikers, like Carlos Ulberg, they're going to be on their P's and Q's in that first round. However, when you go further into the third, into the fourth, into the fifth, that's when they become like less sharp and less powerful in the striking. So I think Yuri Procházka, he needs to take that first and second round off, because this is a 5-rounder, so he's going to have way more time to build into his fights. That's why his more previous fights were kind of more nerve-wracking, because they were 3-rounders. So like when he fought Khalil Rountree and he took off that first and second round, that was a nerve-wracking moment because he only had round 3 to finish Khalil Rountree. But in this matchup, he's going to have way more time to build into the fight, so he definitely needs to take that first round off. He needs to make his reads. He needs to figure out the safest way and the safest timing to close range on Carlos Ulberg. This matchup is going to be a battle between that wild style of Yuri Procházka and that forward pressure of Yuri Procházka versus the passive and technical striking of Carlos Ulberg. But I'm going to go with Yuri Procházka to win this fight. I think Yuri has been fighting top tier light heavyweights way longer than Carlos Ulberg. Carlos Ulberg, I don't think he's experienced someone who is unorthodox like Yuri Procházka. I think that first fight always catches fighters off guard when they fight Yuri Procházka because he's so different. He throws his punches different. He closes range at a different timing. He's way more bouncy. He's way more dynamic in his fighting style. Even Alex Pereira struggled with Yuri Procházka in their first fight. So I think Yuri Procházka is going to surprise Carlos Ulberg with that unorthodox timing. And I think he's going to knock out Carlos Ulberg in the third round. That's going to be my prediction. But like I said, this fight is close because if Carlos Ulberg, if he finds that shot on Yuri's chin, he could knock him out. I do think Yuri Procházka could take a few punches. I don't think it's going to be like the Dominick Reyes knockout where Carlos Ulberg just tapped him on the chin and he went completely out. But even though he can take some punches, he definitely needs to play it safe and take off that first round and then pour it on when Carlos Ulberg kind of loses that edge in that first round. So that's why I'm picking Yuri Procházka by knockout. Either way, I think this card is going to be a very exciting card. You have some really good matchups. I'm really looking forward to this card. But that's going to be it for this video. As usual, tell me what you guys think in the comments and like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll catch you guys in my next video.